بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين.
So please could you tell us a little bit about the lineage that you represent and is transmitted to your students through you?
Sure. Our lineage is called the Kaleemi lineage, and lineage is the translation of the word tariqa. So tariqa in Arabic and Persian and Urdu and all of these languages means the way, and I like to use that word the way in English because it means both the path that you travel on and also the way that you travel. So it's both kind of the direction you go and the manner by which you go. But when we talk about a Sufi way, it's defined by a lineage of teachers from the present all the way back to the past. And so it's a line or a chain, you could say, of teachers who've initiated the next generation of teachers and the next generation, and that initiation gets passed on and gets renewed and refreshed generation after generation until it reaches us here. So our lineage is called the Kaleemi lineage, and it's actually the Kaleemi Nizami Chishti lineage, you could put it that way. So our foundation is in the Chishti Sufi order, and then the Chishti Sufi order has a number of branches, and so we follow the Nizami branch through Nizamuddin Awliya, and then that also has many, many branches, and we follow the branch through Shah Kalimullah. And he was a great teacher in the early 18th century, let's say. He died in 1726, I believe is the year, in Delhi. So he's known as Shah Kalimullah Shah Jahanabadi, and he's named after this place called Shah Jahanabad. Shah Jahan was the great Mughal emperor who built up the Red Fort in Delhi, and so the whole city that formed around the Red Fort in that part of Delhi is called Shah Jahanabad. And Sheikh Kalimullah had a madrasa and a Khanqah in that place. Madrasa is a place for teaching Islamic sciences, teaching about the Quran and the Prophet Muhammad's example and all of the scriptural sciences of Islam. And a Khanqah is a place where Sufis gather to learn zikr, to listen to music, to have sohbat or conversational teachings. And so Sheikh Kalimullah had expertise on both sides. He was a professor in Islamic studies, he was a Sufi master, and so he had both a madrasa and a Khanqah in Shah Jahanabad. So we call him Sheikh Kalimullah Shah Jahanabadi. And the lineage that he passed on to the present takes his name, which is the Kaleemi lineage. So it's basically a Chishti lineage from Muinuddin Chishti from Ajmer. But Sheikh Kalimullah had teachers who belonged to other lineages also, and so he had initiation, of course, into the Chishti lineage, also into the Qadri lineage from Sheikh Abdul Qadir Jilani, the great Sufi teacher from Baghdad, and also from the Suhrawardi lineage and the Naqshbandi lineage. So there are four Sufi orders, you could say, that Sheikh Kalimullah bound up into one. Kind of the way when you build a house and you have electrical wires, and all of those wires are going in the same direction, and so you bind them up as one. And so the Kaleemi lineage is one lineage, but it represents four together. And it's been that way since Sheikh Kalimullah died in 1726. The Chishti order is, it takes its name from Muinuddin Chishti, Khwaja Gharib Nawaz Muinuddin Chishti, who moved from Afghanistan, which was the kind of frontier zone in an earlier generation of the Islamic world, from a little village called Chisht, and that's where he gets his name. So Muinuddin Chishti was from Chisht, and there had been many generations of Sufi teachers there in Chisht. And then the Islamic frontier moved further east due to political developments and incorporated parts of India and Pakistan. And so Muinuddin Chishti moved again to the frontier, to a place called Ajmer. We call it Ajmer Sharif, the noble Ajmer, because it was a town in Rajasthan. It was a Rajput kingdom. And he moved to that place and settled down, and he brought the Chishti lineage to India. And it took on a new color, you could say a new taste, as it absorbed certain qualities of the Indian environment. So the Chishti order, it is associated with a color and a region. So the region that it's associated with is India, meaning the bigger cultural zone of India, not just the modern nation of India. So Pakistan, India, Afghanistan, Bangladesh, that's the zone in which it really spread. The color that it's associated with is ochre, yellow ochre. And you often find many Chishti teachers wearing some symbolic piece of clothing that might be yellow in color. And different groups have a slightly different variation of that color. Actually, the room we're in is a beautiful example of these colors. The wall is actually a very nice yellow ochre color. I didn't plan this, it just happened spontaneously. So many people in the Chishti Nizami order wear a kind of either a pale ochre yellow, like the color of this wall, or a bright yellow that might be like a marigold yellow. Then there's another branch of the Chishti order, which is called the Sabri Chishti order. They tend to wear dark maroon or reddish brown, like the color here behind me. And those two colors are very symbolic. They both symbolize the earth, in either a dark form or a light form. And this is based on one of Muinuddin Chishti's teachings, and it's one of the simplest ones to relay to people, but one of the hardest ones to follow, because it's so simple. He says that you should be humble like the earth, you should be generous like the river, and you should be magnanimous like the sun. That's it. And so the humility of the earth that allows everyone to walk on it, allows everyone to build on it, allows everyone to grow things in it. You can dig graves, you can dig flower gardens, you can plant trees, and the earth never complains. So that's a basic humility teaching, and the Chishti order really focuses on that very deeply. And then he said, be magnanimous like the sun that sheds its light on everyone in a non-judgmental fashion. Whether people are sinners or saints, good people, bad people, worldly people, spiritual people, whether they have high ambition or low, the sun shines on them and gives them life. And so the Chishti teachers also thought that they should be there for everyone. And they had to model their teaching according to the levels of understanding and aspiration that different kinds of people had. But they never wanted to say we're only teaching the elite, or we're only teaching the very special people who have some sort of esoteric knowledge, or we're only teaching the powerful and the rich. So the Chishtis, they took a vow of voluntary poverty in the old days, and they refused to own land or money. If the money were given freely as a gift, they would distribute it to the community, but they didn't believe in saving, even for their own families. And so some of their families suffered greatly because of this teaching. Nowadays, people have adjusted to the modern world and to the banking system, and this teaching about voluntary poverty has sort of fallen a bit by the wayside. But when you go to India, you'll find all kinds of Chishti teachers. Some have land, some have bank accounts, some work in modern professions to support their families, but you do still find some who've renounced all wealth and just live on what the community will provide for them. And if that is a lot, they share it with others, and if it's a little bit, they use it to keep their own life going, and if it's nothing, they sit humbly. There is a very strong teaching that the Chishtis gave, that is, you do not ask for money from people if you need help, and you do not sit in a place where you're asking without having to ask anything. You don't make any overture toward people at all to show that you need their support. If it's freely given, then one accepts it with gratitude, and if not, it wasn't meant to come. So that's a bit of the Chishti order. And the third quality is to be generous like the river or like the ocean, which washes up. It gives water and it gives nutrition and life to everything that it touches. Yeah, so another particular quality of the Chishti order is its love of music and poetry. And there are many Sufi orders that have embraced music. I would say all the Sufi orders have embraced poetry, because in Islamic culture, poetry is the primary art form. If you can think of a religious community that doesn't invest a lot of energy in sculpture or painting, visual arts, especially for worship, the investment is really in words, whether that's calligraphy or architectural decoration that incorporates verses from the Quran, or poetry. But verbal art is really what Islamic culture excelled in. So all Sufi orders have used poetry and verbal arts, but poetry set to music was embraced by only particular orders. Of course, the Mevlevi Sufi order in Turkey, that comes from Maulana Rumi, embraced music very deeply, and also a kind of turning dance, you might want to call it, as a way of meditation. There are certain Sufi orders in North Africa also that have embraced Andalusian music and have a certain kind of very melodious way of reciting the Quran that's quite beautiful. Then the Chishti order, as it grew in India, as I said, it absorbed things from the Indian environment, and one of the things it absorbed was Indian music, which was already a very deep and deep devotional and classical tradition. And Hazrat Muinuddin Chishti, when he moved to India, he brought with him a musical legacy from Central Asia, which was quite well developed. Sufis were already listening to music in Afghanistan and Central Asia, and they combined that with a new style and new instruments and a new depth of love of music that was found in India. And so it was like love upon love. It became a double love of music, and we call that sama. Sama in Arabic and Persian and Urdu means the art of listening. It doesn't actually mean music, ironically. Everybody thinks that sama means the music that you listen to. It doesn't. It means the act of listening to the music. So sama is the formal name for the ritual of listening to Sufi poetry sung in a beautiful voice and set to music. And that has become the kind of specialized technique of meditation that the Chishtis have excelled in, and they've spread it all around the world now in the form of qawwali. That's a particular name we give to this kind of musical session. Qawwali is the general Indian term. It comes from an Arabic word for listening to a beautiful speech. Qawwali is the kind of Sufi music that was lifted out of the folk idiom and became very, very classical. It absorbed court music and courtly etiquette, and wherever the Chishti order went, they hosted large rituals of listening to music in this style. And it's very, very formal. People have a particular way of sitting, and you're not supposed to look up, you're not supposed to eat, you're not supposed to drink, you're not supposed to be distracted by anything. It's a very internal focus as you're listening to this gorgeous music. And at the same time, sometimes people go into ecstatic states and they get up and they maybe offer money to the teacher who's presiding over the gathering, or perhaps they dance a little bit. Dance is probably the wrong word. It's not any choreographed dance, but move. And that's a sign of their having passed away from their own ego and have become totally absorbed in listening to the music. So the Chishti Sufi order is named after Muinuddin Chishti, which doesn't tell us that much. It tells us about a person. But the teachings of the Chishti order you could say have several basic bedrocks, basic foundation stones. One is simplicity and poverty, that is living close to the soil as much as you can. Another is music and appreciation of beauty. Another is love. So the Chishti order is one of those Sufi orders, and there are several that really embrace the teaching of love. And you could call them a Sufi order that's centered on ishq. So ishq is the word for love in Urdu, Persian, Arabic. But it's not just any old kind of love. Actually, Arabic is a very rich language. There are different words for different kinds of love. In English, we kind of lump it all together in one word. But there's mahabba as a kind of ishq, there's as a kind of love. There's muwadda as a kind of love. There's uns as a kind of love. And then there's ishq. And ishq, as you can tell by the sound of it, has a kind of a force to it. Ishq is like yearning love. It's the kind of love that is passionate, and that's the kind of love that Chishti Sufis talk about as something very good. If you don't have ishq, you don't have Sufism in Chishti teachings. If you don't feel love, you're not a Sufi. You could have all the knowledge in the world, you could have great etiquette and great manners, you could be a very adept meditator, you could be a great musician, but if you don't do it because of ishq, if you don't do it because of love, you're not going anywhere. And it goes back to the teachings of Muinuddin Chishti himself. I mean, it's not that he originated the teachings on love. They go back much earlier in the Sufi order, in the Sufi tradition. But Muinuddin Chishti really focused on love, and he even said, there's a teaching of his, that ishq, love is a spark that lands in the heart and becomes a raging fire, and it burns away everything that is not God. So that's the kind of passionate, devotional love that the Chishti teachers were wanting to see in their disciples, and which they saw in themselves. And this is partly why the Chishti teachers were so enamored with music and poetry, because that's the best way to cultivate love in one's psyche, is to listen to love poetry and to listen to it with voices and with instruments and with all of the trappings of beauty that cuts through all of one's ego defenses, gets right into one's gut and sparks that love. And once the love is sparked inside, it then transforms your life with the people that you know, with the work that you do. To the point that Nizamuddin Awliya, who's another great teacher several generations after Muinuddin Chishti, began this Sufi order. Nizamuddin Awliya was the one who really systematized it and spread it throughout the Indian region. And he taught that there's a teaching from the Prophet Muhammad that is the most beloved person in the sight of God is the one who loves God's creatures best. So the way you show your love for God is by loving God's creatures, meaning other people, and by extension, all living things. The word he used there is khalq. Khalq in Arabic is a word used for people primarily, but it also means the whole of creation. And so the Prophet Muhammad supposedly said this teaching. I don't know if it's a true attribution to him, but Nizamuddin Awliya thought it was, and based his teachings on that. He said the person who's most beloved to God is the one who loves God's creatures best and makes them happy. So that's the kind of love. It's both interior and exterior. That is, it's in your heart. It purifies your motivation. It drives your values in life, and it's expressed in care for other people and other living things. And in that sense, the Chishti order as a path of love may have different emphases than other orders. Some orders really focus on politeness and decorum, a proper, respectful way of behaving with people. Other orders focus on the pursuit of knowledge. Some orders really focus on kind of ascetic self-control. The Chishti order says those things are all good. Knowledge is good, self-control is good, politeness and respect is good. But if all of that is done without love, it's like ashes.